Welcome back to the Champion Forum podcast. Jeff Hancher here, and I am on a mission to help others lead, inspire, and win in this life. Last week on the show, we talked about becoming the kind of person that feedback can absolutely change. We started to unpack why this whole feedback thing is truly a gift. We talked about why it hurts sometimes. I introduced you to this receiver framework. If you haven't listened to this episode yet, hit the stop, hit the pause, go back and listen to last week's episode, because this one definitely builds from that. Because today I want to challenge your thinking a little bit more, because I think that most people have the wrong goal when it comes to this subject. Most people hope someone gives them some feedback. But high performers, they don't hope someone gives them feedback. They pursue feedback. And that's the difference. You know, there's an old saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Have you heard this? But I want to argue something maybe even a little more powerful than that amazing quote. When the student becomes hungry, they start looking for teachers. Now that's transformational. Every conversation starts to become a classroom. Every mistake, it becomes a lesson, a propellant. Every setback, it becomes an education. You know, coachable people that I've been around, they don't ask, who's criticizing me? What they do ask is, who's helping me become who I want to be? Man, that's a completely different mindset, isn't it? So today, I want to talk us through how to build that mindset. Because the most coachable people, they don't wait for feedback. They pursue it.
This is the Champion Forum podcast with Jeff Hancher, the forum for leaders, champions, and dreamers.
This episode is proudly sponsored by Lato AI, a leader in custom AI solutions designed to help businesses work faster, smarter, and more efficiently. Whether it's workflow automation, customer engagement, or operational optimization, Lato AI builds intelligent private systems that create measurable impact. Instead of one-size-fits-all software, Lato AI develops systems tailored to how your business actually works. Lato AI doesn't just build tools. They put AI to work in your business every day. Visit latoai.com to learn more. That's LATOAI.com.
Hey, everybody, I'm so excited for this subject. You know, one thing that I have learned over the years is that the higher you climb, the less feedback that you will naturally receive. I want you to think about this. When you're new, people are correcting everything. I mean, they're telling you, this is wrong, that's wrong, turn left, move right, up, down. They're telling you everything. But as you gain responsibility, especially in leadership, people become a little more hesitant to give you feedback. As you become the boss, many people start telling you the truth altogether sometimes. And why is that? Not because everything's perfect, not because you're the perfect person, not because you're doing it all right, because they become a little bit intimidated. They become a little bit afraid. And leader, can I tell you something? That's a dangerous, dangerous place to be. Because if feedback decreases while your responsibility keeps going up, you know what happens? Blind spots become everywhere you go. And that's why the best people I've ever met, they don't wait for the feedback. They go chase it down. They chase it down. You know, I remember becoming a leader for the first time. Oh, man. I could write novels of books on what I did wrong and what I didn't know. You know, when I was this brand new, fresh rookie leader, I assumed that if something needed to be corrected, that somebody would come and tell me. Why? Because that's how it's been so far. I step out of line, somebody's right there telling me. How naive of me. How naive of me, looking back. And the higher I climbed, the quieter the rooms became. Not because I was getting better. Let me tell you this. I have yet to achieve this perfection level. And by the way, none of us are going to. I wasn't getting better. So why would the room become quieter? Because people became less willing to challenge me. That realization, it started to change how I led people. I stopped waiting. I stopped waiting for feedback, and I started asking. Up the org chart, down the org chart, left, right, you name it. I wanted all the feedback. I didn't say I liked all the feedback, but I knew I needed it. Here's today's big idea for the show. Feedback isn't something you receive. It's something you pursue. Feedback isn't something I'm waiting on, because I would say it's a healthy position to get to when you say, I welcome feedback. Congratulations. Look, you're probably further ahead than most people, but can I just challenge us to go one step further and say, you know what? I'm not going to be just the person that welcomes feedback. I'm going to be the person that goes and pursues it, because there's a huge difference in these two things. And I want to make this very practical. Y'all know I love a good framework, right? I'm going to give you another one today. And I'm calling this one the growth framework. And here's why. When I built this framework, preparing for this episode, why I think it's so important. Because feedback means absolutely jack squat if nothing doesn't produce growth. If nothing in this feedback is producing growth, it means absolutely nothing. And so I think this framework and this acronym, hopefully it's going to help you remember this so that you can execute and make it part of who you're becoming. We start with the G. Go get the feedback. Go get the feedback. Don't wait. Initiate it. Initiate receiving feedback. And here's one of my favorite questions to use. And I want to challenge you to use this. You say this to somebody. You say, hey, if you were coaching me, Brad, what's the first thing that you'd work on if you were coaching me? Wow. Look out. Look out. It might be coming. But notice how non-defensive that question is. Or maybe you ask somebody, what's one habit that you've observed of mine that you think is really helping me and serving me? And what's one habit that you would say, man, that habit, it's holding me back from my potential? That's another one that it's like, wow, you could literally get feedback from that question that could transform who you become. Maybe you ask somebody, hey, what's something that everyone else probably sees about me that I don't? What is something that everyone else sees about me that I don't? Man, those are courageous questions. Can you imagine if you had really bad hygiene, really bad body odor, and nobody ever told you, and you ask somebody this question, and they say, look, I got to tell you, like, I would have never told you this if you wouldn't have asked, but I got to let you know, man, your BO is humming, brother. Your BO, when you come into work, oh my gosh, people are running the other way. My goodness sake, that is hard to hear, isn't it? But can you imagine, the first thing that you would probably think, how long has this been going on? How long has this been going on? I'd like to think that nobody shows up to work stinky. But how long has this been going on? Now I'm a little bit embarrassed. Why hasn't anybody said anything? We got to go seek the feedback, right? And hopefully that's not the case with anybody listening, but you get my point here. Here's my challenge. Here's a little piece of application that I want to challenge you with. Before this week even ends, ask one of those few questions that I just presented to you. And I'm not saying ask it to your spouse, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, not to your best friend. Ask someone who has observed you professionally. Maybe it is your boss. Maybe it's a subordinate. Maybe it's a peer. But ask someone that truly has observed you. In the last episode, when I was making this foundation, I talked about Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan, he had Phil Jackson, didn't he? But he wasn't alone. We think of other greats like Tom Brady. Tom Brady had quarterback coaches into his 40s. Tiger Woods rebuilt his golf swing after winning the majors. Remember that story from the last episode? That's wild, right? Why is it that these people that were at the top of their game, why would they continue to have coaches pouring into their life? Because they believed something powerful. They believed that success is never permission to stop learning. Never permission to stop learning. Then we get the R. Receive without reaction. This is composure when the tough feedback comes that sometimes we got to muster this up. One of the greatest disciplines that you'll ever develop is the pause. Man, there's power in the pause, especially when you're getting information and getting some feedback that's pretty tough to hear. When someone finishes giving feedback, don't answer them, please. Don't answer. Pause. Take a breath. And then say these 3 powerful words. Powerful to the point of transformation words. Tell me more. 3 of the most powerful words that you will ever speak out of your mouth when somebody gives you feedback. Good feedback, bad feedback, critique. The feedback they just gave me wasn't true. They don't know what they're talking about. How dare them? These are all the things running through your mind. We talked about this in episode 1. And we just pause and we take a breath and we say, tell me more. Tell me more. Those 3 words, you know what they communicate to that person and to you? They communicate humility. They communicate curiosity. And they usually uncover what is the real issue here. Then we get to the O in growth. Own your part of this. Own your part of this. Notice I didn't say own all of it. I'm not saying own all of it. Why? Well, because sometimes feedback is exaggerated. Sometimes the person giving you the feedback is a little emotionally hijacked themselves. If that's the case, tell them to go back and read that book, Firm Feedback in a Fragile World. But it's true. Sometimes what the feedback that we're getting, it's inaccurate. Sometimes it's emotionally triggered. But rarely, and I mean rarely, is there absolutely nothing to learn from the feedback. That's a rare thing. So ask yourself this question. What's my responsibility here? What's my responsibility? And by the way, what's my contribution to this? Friend, that's maturity. That is maturity. Now, I want to give you a tool before we go on to the next letter. I want to give you a tool that I hope everybody listening remembers. And it's a filter tool. When feedback comes your way, run it through a few filters. There's 4 filters specifically that I would tell you are great filters to have. Because look, not all feedback is true and not all feedback is effective, but it all has some level of opportunity to grow. Here's those filters that I think that you can use to find out where's the meat and where's the bone that I need to spit out. And filter 1 is this. Is this true? Is what they're saying true? Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is no. And by the way, this is your perspective. Filter 2. Is any part of this feedback true? Any part of it true? And this might be the most important question, because even if only 20% of this feedback is accurate, you know what? That's still 20% worth improving, isn't it? Oh my, you know what we just uncovered? We just uncovered some opportunity, didn't we? And then you have this next filter. Why might someone see me this way? I just heard this feedback. Why might someone see me this way? You know what? This is where emotional intelligence begins to grow inside of us. Because intent and perception, they are not the same thing, are they? You may have intended one thing, but leadership is experienced through perception. Life is experienced through perception. If 5 people misunderstand you, the issue may no longer be communication. It might be consistency, yeah? It might be a consistency opportunity. But then we can run it through this last filter. And this last filter asks the question, what happens if I act on this feedback? What happens if I take this feedback and I actually act on it? What happens? Imagine your life 1 year from the moment the feedback is delivered if you actually changed it. Not defended it, not explained it, changed it. Would your marriage improve? Would your leadership impact improve? Would your team trust you more? Would your influence as a person grow? Because I truly believe this. In life, sometimes the greatest breakthroughs, they come from the smallest adjustments. So many of us, we jump onto the Champion Forum podcast thinking I'm going to drop some bomb that you never heard before and it's going to revolutionize your life. I wish I could, by the way, and I hope I have from time to time. But here's what I've learned on this journey. It's usually not the big breakthrough. It's the smallest adjustment over time that becomes the most effective. This takes us to the W in growth. Work the feedback. Let's not ever define ourselves as feedback collectors. What's your hobby? I collect feedback. No. Let's convert feedback into real habits, into real life change. Let's say someone tells you, hey, you know what, Joe, you interrupt people a lot. Great to hear. Now what? Now you got the feedback. Now what? What's your move? Are you just collecting this feedback? Now what? Okay, now I got to be thinking about what is one measurable commitment that I can be acting on. You know what I'm going to do? For the next 30 days, I'm going to fight off this temptation to interrupt people. Well, how are you going to do that? Here's how I'm going to do it. Anytime that I'm speaking with somebody, when I think they're done, I'm going to count to 3 in my head. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000 after they're done speaking. Oh, wow. Now that's growth. By the way, who likes people that do you like being interrupted? Do you know somebody that interrupts people a lot? Isn't that awkward and weird? You want to? Here's another question I have for you. How come you've never told them? How come you've never told them? But I can tell you this, if that's you, I don't care if it's interrupting or whatever that shortcoming might be. I can't just be a feedback collector. I got to act on the feedback. Feedback without action, you know what it is? It's just information. It's, thanks for letting me know, and doing nothing with it. Feedback with action, now we're into some transformation. Then we come to the T. And this is a big one and sometimes a hard one to do. Thank them. Whoever's giving you this feedback, thank them. One of the greatest compliments that you can give someone is gratitude. And yes, even when the feedback stings a little bit. And yes, even if it wasn't delivered perfectly. And yes, even if it wasn't 100% true, say, you know what? Thank you for the feedback. You know why? Because people who feel appreciated, they're going to continue investing. People who feel like you value something, they're going to continue investing. People who feel punished by giving you feedback, they stop telling the truth. And my friend, this is a problem. I would tell you, you would be better off getting inaccurate feedback than no feedback. Then we get to the H. Honor the investment. And this is where almost everybody that I've ever coached, that I've ever mentored, this is where we fall short. Follow up with the person that gave you the feedback. A month later, call them, send them a message, shoot them an email, and say something like this, hey, I wanted to let you know that I've been working on what you shared with me last month. Can you imagine hearing this? I'm asking you. Can you imagine giving somebody some tough feedback and them calling you a month later and saying, listen, I heard what you said, and I want to let you know. I didn't like hearing it, but I've been working really hard on it, and I needed to hear it. Wow. Can you imagine hearing that? If you heard that from somebody, wouldn't it make you more willing to invest in that person again? You dang right it would. Let's be that person. Why? Because we are people that seek feedback. We don't wait for feedback. When I create myself as somebody that values feedback, you know what naturally happens? I start getting more of it, and more of it is a good thing, not a bad thing. Feedback should create relationships, not just conversations. Conversations are fleeting whenever there's no real deposits and no real action. And then let's get into it. What if the feedback's wrong? Because, oh my goodness sake, have I had countless hours of conversation around, well, they weren't right. Well, Jeff, they're wrong. Well, Jeff, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about it. What if the feedback that you're getting is unfair? What if they're completely wrong? What if they don't even know what they're talking about? Has anybody ever given you feedback and you're like, you don't even know what you're talking about? I know I have, but here's my answer to you. Guess what? You're still winning. You are still winning despite all of those things. Why? Because you've practiced humility. You've practiced listening. You've practiced emotional regulation. And you've modeled maturity. Congratulations. But before you throw that feedback away, because it's an imperfect messenger, before you throw it away, always ask this question: what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? You know, I've discovered something over the years. Most feedback is almost never completely right. You know what else I've discovered over the years? Most feedback is almost never completely wrong. It's usually somewhere right in the middle, from my perspective. Your job isn't to determine if it's right or wrong. Your job is to find the lesson in the feedback. Listen, I love studying successful people. And when I was preparing this teaching today, somebody that I thought of was Oprah Winfrey. Her story is amazing. If you haven't studied the life of Oprah Winfrey, whether you like her or don't, or her philosophies or political affiliations, and forget about all that for 1 minute, okay? You cannot dispute how amazing her story is. You know, early in her career, producers that were around her, they encouraged her. Hey, Oprah, stop trying to fit into the mold of a traditional news anchor and lean into your natural ability to connect with people. Oprah, you have something unique. You know what? Oprah at the time, she was probably a little bit insecure. She was probably trying to be like all the other popular news anchors. Hey, you know what? That's the award-winning news anchor in the city down the road. I'm going to sound like them, act like them, show up like them. But the people that were around her were saying, man, Oprah, you have something that not a lot of people have. And I know it's a little risky and it might be a little challenging for you, but we need you to lean into that. Man, she embraced that feedback. She embraced it rather than resist it. And that willingness for her to adapt, it helped shape one of the most influential careers that media has ever seen. Can you imagine what her life might have looked like if she would have just tried to fit into the normal mold of the news anchor of the day? Friends, the point isn't that every piece of feedback is perfect. It's that transformation often begins when we're willing to consider another perspective. That's where growth happens. That's where it happens. Let me ask you something. What if the next level of your career, of your life, is hiding behind one conversation that you've been avoiding? What if the next level of propellant in your life is one person's feedback that maybe you haven't gotten yet? What if your spouse has been trying to tell you something for years? What if your team sees something that you don't see? What if your boss has stopped giving you feedback because it isn't worth the emotional toll that you provide when they do? What if the breakthrough that you've been praying for is waiting right inside feedback that somebody else has around you? I'm going to leave you with something that I hope you actually do. This week, I want to challenge you to ask 3 people this one question, and here it is. If you genuinely wanted me to become the best version of myself, what's one thing that you would tell me? If you genuinely wanted me to become the best version of myself, what's one thing that you would tell me? Then ask one follow-up. Can you tell me more? No defending, no explaining, no interrupting. Just listen, write it down, reflect on it, act on it. Then guess what? 30 days later, go back to that same 3 people and ask them this. Have you noticed any improvement based off of our conversation last month? Because here's what I've learned. People don't respect perfection. They respect progress. As we close this 2-part series, let me leave you with one final thought. In Firm Feedback in a Fragile World, I wrote about the responsibility that leaders have to create cultures where feedback is normal, where it's expected, where it's safe. But cultures, they don't change simply because leaders become better at giving feedback. I think that's a big part of it. Cultures change when people become better also at receiving the feedback. So certainly continue to execute the principles that I talk about in the framework inside of Firm Feedback in a Fragile World, but also use the information in this two-part series to begin building a culture where people truly value feedback and understand how to receive it. Every great team, every great marriage, every great company, every great leader, man, they all have something in common, don't they? They all have something in common. Someone cared enough to tell the truth, and someone else was humble enough to receive it. Don't spend your life just searching for people who are always going to agree with you and they're just the yes sirs. Surround yourself with people who care enough to help you grow, because feedback is not the enemy, y'all. Feedback is not. It's one of the greatest tools for shaping who we can become. The question isn't whether you're going to receive feedback. You're going to receive feedback. The real question is this: are you going to let the feedback change who you become? I appreciate you joining me for this special two-part series. Make sure that you get the show notes emailed directly to you by signing up on the homepage of our website, jeffhancher.com. We break down the content of every episode, including this two-part series, into thought-provoking questions, application that you can really wrestle through on your own, or you can use it as a training tool for your entire team. If these episodes challenged you, man, I'd love to hear from you. Email me your thoughts around this two-part series. If you've never emailed me before, I'm asking you to email me now. Email me. Tell me your thoughts on this whole receiving feedback in a healthy way. Email your thoughts and, of course, your feedback to info@jeffhancher.com. info@jeffhancher.com. And by the way, share these episodes with somebody that you lead. Maybe somebody that's invested in your growth, or somebody who you know is committed to becoming more coachable. And if the content is adding value to you, please, I'm asking you, leave me a review. It's a shameless ask. Why? Because those reviews help more leaders discover these conversations. Until next time, seek the feedback, receive the feedback, act on the feedback, and keep turning that pressure into potential.
The Champion Forum Podcast with Jeff Hancher. Lead, inspire, win.